Hello everyone, and welcome. Let's dive into a story that will send a chill down your spine. The road to Lake Waverly was narrow and quiet, bordered by tall birch trees that swayed under the late autumn wind. Elena Marsh, a 34-year-old novelist from Boston, had driven nearly 6 hours to reach the small cabin she'd rented for the month. She needed silence. She desperately needed it. Her last book had been a commercial failure, a critical flop. Her publisher was waiting, tapping their fingers impatiently, but her mind was a barren landscape, completely empty of ideas. This place, this remote lake house, was supposed to fix that. It was her last resort. When she finally arrived, the scene was both beautiful and bleak. The lake was half frozen, a sheet of ice reflecting a dull silver sky. The house stood alone at the very edge of the water, its wind dark with age, its windows fogged from the inside, as if holding its breath. It looked abandoned, almost forgotten by time. But the key, hidden under a cracked flower pot, turned smoothly in the lock. A good sign, she thought. The moment she stepped inside, the scent of pine and old dust filled her lungs. It wasn't unpleasant, just ... old. There was a grand stone fireplace, sturdy writing desk perfectly positioned to face the lake, and an old leather chair that groaned in protest when she sat down. It was perfect. Exactly the kind of isolated sanctuary she'd been dreaming of. This was where she would write her masterpiece. As she began to unpack, setting her laptop and notebooks on the desk, Elena noticed something else already there. It was a thin, weathered journal. Its cover was torn, the pages yellowed and brittle with age. Curiosity got the better of her. She picked it up. On the very first page, written in neat, slanted handwriting, were the words, "For whoever finds this, some stories write themselves." Elena couldn't help but smile. A nice little touch. Maybe it was left by a previous tenant, another writer seeking inspiration. Maybe it was nothing at all. Still, she placed the journal beside her own notebook, telling herself she'd take a proper look later. That night, the weather turned. Rain started to fall, soft at first, then harder, drumming a frantic rhythm against the roof. The lake, now a dark churning mass, shimmered under intermittent flashes of lightning. Elena made herself a cup of tea, coaxed a fire to life in the stone fireplace, and sat by the desk, ready to conquer the blank page. But as she reached for her notebook, her eyes fell on the old journal. It was open. She was certain she hadn't left it that way. Her heart skipped a beat. The page was blank, except for a single, chilling line at the bottom, written in the same neat, slanted hand. "You came here to remember." Her breath caught in her throat. She scanned the empty room, her senses on high alert. The rain hammered harder now, the sound echoing through the house like heavy, deliberate footsteps. With a trembling hand, Elena slammed the journal shut, whispering to herself, trying to calm her racing pulse. "It's just an old notebook. It's nothing." But as she looked out the window, across the dark, stormy lake, a single light flickered to life on the opposite shore, a light that definitely hadn't been there before. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean. The air was crisp, and the sun cast a pale, watery light over the lake. Elena tried to convince herself that the events of the previous night were just a product of her overactive imagination, fueled by exhaustion and the unsettling atmosphere of the old cabin. She was a writer, after all. Her mind was built to create drama where there was none. She spent the day trying to write, forcing words onto the page, but they felt hollow, lifeless. Her gaze kept drifting to the closed journal sitting on her desk. It felt like it was watching her. She couldn't resist any longer. She told herself it was research, a way to break her writer's block. With a deep breath, she opened the journal again. A new sentence had appeared, right below the last one. "The water keeps its secrets." A shiver traced its way down her spine. This was impossible. She was alone in the house. She had been all day. How could this be happening? She flipped through the pages. Most were blank, but she found a few entries scattered throughout, all cryptic, all unsettling. "He never left the lake. Don't look in the cellar." She saw his face in the water. Her curiosity, now mixed with a heavy dose of fear, took over. Against her better judgment, she found the door to the cellar. It was old, wooden, and secured with a heavy iron bolt. It took all her strength to slide it open. A wave of cold, musty air washed over her, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else. Something faintly metallic like old blood. She fumbled for the light switch, but of course it didn't work. Using the flashlight on her phone, she cautiously descended the creaking wooden stairs. The cellar was small and cluttered with forgotten junk. Old furniture covered in white sheets, rusty tools, and stacks of yellowed newspapers. As she swept the beam of her flashlight across the dirt floor, she saw it. A patch of earth near the far wall looked disturbed, more loosely packed than the surrounding ground. Her heart was pounding in her chest like a drum. She knew she should leave, run out of the house, and never look back. But the novelist in her, the part of her that craved a story, was stronger than her fear. She found an old spade leaning against the wall and began to dig. The soil was soft and gave way easily. After only a few minutes, the spade hit something hard with a dull thud. It wasn't a rock. Carefully, she scraped away the dirt and uncovered a small wooden box. It was old, the wood warped and stained. With trembling fingers, she pried it open. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a collection of old black and white photographs and a single tarnished silver locket. She opened the locket first. On one side was a picture of a smiling young woman with dark, familiar eyes. On the other, a man with a kind face. Elena then looked at the photographs. They were of the same couple, posing happily by the lake, in front of the cabin. In one photo, the woman was holding a journal. It's the very same journal that was now sitting on Elena's desk upstairs. A cold dread settled in her stomach as she turned over the last photo. Written on the back, in faded ink, was a date from 50 years ago, and two names, Arthur and Elena. Her name, it had to be a coincidence. It had to be. The woman in the photograph. The longer she looked, the more she saw a strange, unsettling resemblance to herself. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, it was like looking at a ghost. Shaking, she raced back upstairs, the box clutched in her hand. The journal was on the desk, open to a new page. The handwriting was no longer neat. It was frantic, scrawled across the page. He promised he would love me forever. He promised he wouldn't let me leave. He lied. Suddenly, the floorboards above her creaked. Footsteps, slow, heavy footsteps pacing back and forth in the attic. Elena froze, listening. She was supposed to be alone. The rental agreement said so. The owner lived hundreds of miles away. The footsteps stopped directly above her head. Then, a low, scraping sound began, as if something heavy was being dragged across the floor. Panic seized her. She backed away from the desk, her eyes darting towards the front door. She had to get out. This story was no longer just on the page. It was alive, and it was in the house with her. As she turned to run, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Reflected in the dark glass of the window, standing directly behind her, was the figure of a man. His clothes were soaked, dripping water onto the floor, and his face was pale, his eyes dark and empty, just like the man from the locket. It was Arthur. He raised a hand not to harm her, but to point towards the journal. His voice was a watery whisper, a sound that seemed to come from the depths of the lake itself. "You came here to remember, Elena. It's time to finish our story." The lights in the cabin flickered and died, plunging the room into absolute darkness, with only the faint, silvery light of the frozen lake outside. And in the oppressive silence that followed, Elena understood. She hadn't come to the lake house to write a new story. She had come to finish a very, very old one, her own. Thank you so much for joining me on this chilling journey. What do you think happens next? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the unknown. Until next time, stay safe and keep questioning the shadows. The rain fell relentlessly through the night, a drumming beat against the cabin roof that promised no end. When dawn finally broke, it revealed a world swallowed by fog. The lake, usually a clear, dark mirror, was now a roiling sea of mist. So thick and white it looked like smoke rising from the water's surface. It was in this ethereal quiet that Elena awoke, the strange words from the old journal still echoing in her mind. "You came here to remember." She tried to laugh, a small, hollow sound in the still morning air. A joke, right? some previous visitor's attempt at being profound. But the words had latched onto her, a persistent whisper she couldn't shake. After a simple breakfast of toast and coffee, she found herself drawn to the window, the journal resting on her lap like a sleeping cat. The paper was worn, the edges soft and frayed. It felt ancient, imbued with the touch of countless hands before hers. She turned to the second page. It was blank. The third, also empty. Disappointment pricked at her, but then, on the fourth page, something faint emerged. It wasn't ink. It was an impression, as if someone had written with a dry pen, pressing the words into the very fibers of the paper. She had to angle the journal just right, letting the weak morning light catch the indentations. You arrived on a Thursday, alone, the same way you left. A frown creased her brow. It was true. She had driven up on Thursday, a solo trip to escape the city's noise. But how could this book know that? It was an uncanny coincidence, a little too specific to be a guess. She examined the journal's cover, again worn brown leather, utterly anonymous. No name, no date, not a single clue to its origin. Sighing, she was about to snap it shut, to dismiss it as a strange but ultimately meaningless discovery. But then her gaze drifted to the small wooden desk by the window. Her own notebook, the one she'd brought to jot down her thoughts, lay open. She froze. She hadn't touched it since she'd arrived. And there, on the crisp, clean page, scrawled in her own looping handwriting, were the exact same words she'd just deciphered. You arrived on a Thursday, alone. A cold dread trickled down her spine. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't write that. Her hand trembled as she reached for it, her own writing now looking alien and threatening. Just as her fingers brushed the page, a sudden, violent gust of wind slammed the cabin door shut with a deafening bang, making her jump. The old journal slid from her lap, tumbling to the floor. It didn't just fall. Its pages fluttered and danced in the sudden draft, as if an unseen breath were flipping through them, searching. That night, sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. The fire in the hearth was her only companion, its flickering light casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on her eyes. She had placed the journal on the mantelpiece, as far away as she could bear, but she couldn't take her eyes off it. Every time the logs popped and crackled, she flinched, convinced she saw the book shift. Just a fraction of an inch, inching closer to the edge. The cabin, once a cozy retreat, now felt like a cage. She was trapped inside with something that watched her from the pages of a book. The digital clock on her bedside table glowed a menacing red. 3:13 a.m., the witching hour, or close enough. As the digits flipped to 3:14, a new sound broke the silence. Footsteps. On the wooden porch outside. They were slow, heavy, each step deliberate and full of weight. Someone was out there, walking in the dead of night, in the middle of nowhere. Elena held her breath, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she was sure it was audible. The footsteps padded closer. Then a dark shadow passed by the window, a fleeting silhouette against the swirling fog. Then it stopped, right outside her window. The silence that followed was worse than the footsteps, a heavy, expectant void. She waited, every nerve screaming for a knock on the door. But the knock never came. Instead, a sharp single rap echoed through the cabin. It wasn't on the door, it was on the window pane right beside her. It took every ounce of courage she possessed to turn her head, to force her eyes toward the glass. The fog outside was a solid wall of white, obscuring everything, but something had been drawn in the condensation on the pane, a message written with the tip of a finger. 2 words, stark and chilling, glowed in the firelight. Keep writing. The storm was gone. It's just like that. The world had washed itself clean. Sunlight danced on the lake, cutting through a delicate layer of mist that hovered over the water like a ghost. For a fleeting moment, everything felt peaceful, almost normal. I poured myself a coffee, the bitter aroma filling the small cabin kitchen, and sat down at my desk. My goal was simple. Write something, anything, to push the memory of that strange journal out of my head. But when I opened my laptop, the screen glowed back at me, already filled with words. Words I knew I hadn't typed. The knock came again at 3:14. She didn't answer this time. My blood ran cold, and a tremor started in my hands. I hadn't told a soul about what happened last night. How could this be here? With a shaking finger, I clicked on the file properties. Last modified, 3:14 a.m. The exact time the knocking had started. I slammed the laptop shut, the plastic clap echoing in the silence. "No," I muttered, my voice hoarse. "No, I'm just losing it. I'm tired, that's all." I needed to prove it to myself. I needed to show my own mind who was in control. I grabbed the old leather-bound journal from the corner of the desk, its weight feeling heavier than before. Flipping to a fresh blank page, I took a deep breath, picked up a pen, and with a hand that was surprisingly steady, I wrote, "Someone will come to the door at noon." Then I waited. The hours crawled by. I watched the sun climb higher in the sky, its light shifting across the wooden floorboards. The lake outside remained perfectly still, a pane of glass reflecting the clear blue sky. The only sounds were the familiar groans and creaks of the old cabin settling around me. It was a silence so deep it felt loud. Noon arrived. The clock on my phone ticked over from 11:59 to 12 o'clock. Nothing. Not a sound. A nervous, giddy laugh escaped my lips. "See?" I said to the empty room. "See? Nothing happened." It's all in my head. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. I was just stressed, overworked. The isolation was getting to me. That was all. But then, at 12:07, a new sound cut through the quiet. The crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. My heart leaped into my throat. I peered through the window and saw a silver pickup truck parked just outside. A man in a brown jacket stepped out. He was tall, maybe in his 50s, with a calm, weathered face. Walked up to the porch and knocked gently on the door. "Miss Marsh?" he called out, his voice polite and steady. "I'm David, the property manager." My stomach twisted into a tight knot. "Property manager?" "Just doing a quick check to see if everything's all right," he continued. "You weren't supposed to have any neighbors this week, so I wanted to make sure things were okay." I took a deep breath, trying to plaster a normal, friendly smile on my face before opening the door. How did he know my name? I hadn't told anyone I was here. No. Not my agent, not my publisher, not even my closest friends. This was supposed to be my secret escape. "Everything's fine," I lied, my voice sounding surprisingly even. "Just getting some writing done." He nodded, his gaze drifting past me toward the lake. "It's a beautiful place, isn't it?" he said, a thoughtful look on his face. "Has a bit of a history, though." My curiosity, a dangerous and foolish thing, got the better of me. "What kind of history?" I asked, trying to sound casual. David hesitated as if weighing his words. "Well, the couple who owned it before, it didn't end well. The husband disappeared one night. The police searched for weeks, but they never found him. Everyone just assumed he drowned in the lake." He paused, looking back at me. "Wife, she left right after that. Couldn't stand to be here. To be honest, no one stayed in this cabin for very long since then." A chill that had nothing to do with the morning air crept down my spine. Do you happen to know their names?" I asked, my heart beginning to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. He scratched his chin, thinking. "Can't say I recall the husband's name, but the woman's. I think her name was Osh, actually. Just like yours, the world tilted. The trees, the lake, the sky, it all blurred for a second as a wave of dizziness hit me. Marsh, my name." I think you're mistaken," I whispered, the words barely audible.
"Oh."
But David just shrugged, oblivious to the terror flooding my system. "Maybe it was a while ago." He gave me a final friendly nod. "Well, you be careful with the storms out here. They can play tricks on you, make you hear things that aren't there." With that, he turned, walked back to his truck, and drove away, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence once more. I stood frozen in the doorway for what felt like an eternity before stumbling back inside. My eyes landed on the desk. The journal, which I had closed, was now flipped open. My own handwriting from this morning, the prediction about someone coming at noon, was still there. But beneath it, new words had appeared. They weren't written in ink. They were faint, pressed into the page, the same ghostly indentations as before. They read, "You're writing what she couldn't finish." I stared at the words, my pulse thundering in my ears. A question formed on my lips, a desperate whisper to the empty cabin. Who is she? And from somewhere deep within the house, from the shadows of the floor above, something answered. A quiet, deliberate creak. The unmistakable sound of footsteps, slowly moving upstairs. Thank you so much for joining me on this terrifying journey. If you're as hooked as I am, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more chills. Let me know in the comments what you think will happen next, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay safe out there. Hello, and welcome back to the channel. We've got a story for you today, one that will make you think twice about ever renting a quiet cabin in the woods. So, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive in. The sound came again slow, deliberate, and unmistakable. Someone or something was walking upstairs. Elena froze at her desk, every nerve straining. The cabin had an attic, but she'd never gone up there. She stood, the floor creaking under her feet, and whispered into the oppressive silence. Hello? No answer, just one more step, directly above her head. It was a heavy, measured sound, as if someone was pacing, thinking. A chill that had nothing to do with the night air crept down her spine. The rational part of her brain screamed that it was just the old house settling, or maybe an animal had found its way in. But this was different. This felt intentional. Grabbing the flashlight from her bag, she started for the attic. The narrow staircase was hidden behind a small door she'd barely noticed before. As she climbed, each step groaned like it hadn't been touched in years, protesting her weight. The smell of dust, old wood, and dry pine filled her nose, thick and suffocating. At the top, a small wooden door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of blackness visible beyond it. Her hand trembled as she pushed it open. The flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, illuminating a scene straight from a forgotten time. Piles of dusty boxes were stacked against the walls. Old furniture, draped in white sheets like slumbering ghosts, littered the space. In the center, a vintage typewriter sat on a small table, covered in a delicate filigree of cobwebs. But what truly caught her eye, what made her breath catch in her throat, was the desk in the far corner. It was identical to the one downstairs where she'd been writing. The same dark wood, the same ornate carvings along the legs, and on it lay another journal. It was the same kind of paper, the same torn leather cover as her own. Her heart began to pound against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the silent attic. She moved towards it, the floorboards groaning with every step she took. She brushed the thick layer of dust from the cover and opened it. The first page had a single, chilling sentence, written in elegant, looping cursive, to the one who came after me. Elena's fingers traced the words. The handwriting was eerily familiar. It was the same as the single entry in the journal downstairs. It's the one about David. But unlike that one, these pages weren't empty. They were filled, hundreds of entries, a lifetime of thoughts and fears pressed into the paper. And they were all signed with the same name, Margaret Marsh. Elena whispered the name aloud. Ow. And the sound was swallowed by the oppressive quiet of the attic. Margaret Marsh. That was the woman David's landlord had mentioned, the one who'd lived here before him, the one who had also been a writer. She flipped through the pages quickly, her flashlight beam dancing across the spidery script. Most of the entries were diary-like, mundane, and yet deeply sad. Margaret wrote about her husband, about her profound loneliness in the isolated cabin, about hearing strange things in the house. She described sounds in the walls, footsteps in the night, the very same things Elena was now experiencing. The hair on Elena's arms stood on end. It felt less like reading a diary and more like looking into a mirror of her own growing dread. Then she reached the final entry. The ink was darker, more hurried, as if written in a state of panic. It stopped her cold. It read, "He didn't drown. The lake keeps what it wants. I wrote about him to keep him close. Every word brings him back. And now it's bringing her too. The one who will finish what I started." A sudden, intense cold swept through the attic, seeping into her bones. The air grew heavy, charged with a new energy. Elena's flashlight flickered once, twice, then steadied, but the momentary darkness had amplified the terror. From the corner of her eye, she saw a flicker of movement. The old typewriter. It made a soft asterisk, click, asterisk. Then another. And another. Her heart hammered against her chest. She took a hesitant step closer, her flashlight beam shaking, revealing the empty page loaded into the machine. And then she saw it. Letters began appearing, one by one, the keys depressing on their own. Elena, her name. The beam shook violently in her hand now. A strangled gasp escaped her lips. She stumbled back, breathing hard, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. No, she whispered, backing away towards the stairs. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from downstairs. It was the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Her journal. It had fallen from the desk. She didn't hesitate. She scrambled down the attic stairs, nearly tripping in her haste, her mind screaming. She burst back into the main room, her eyes darting to her desk. The journal lay open on the floor, its pages fluttering wildly as if caught in a powerful, invisible wind. But there was no wind. The windows were closed tight. New words were pressing themselves into the blank page, indenting the paper right before her eyes, appearing from nothing. "You've found her. Don't stop writing now." Elena stared, paralyzed by fear and disbelief. As she watched, the original words she had written about David, the ones she decopied from Margaret S., entry began to fade. The ink seemed to lift from the page, dissolving into nothingness. And in their place, new words appeared, written in her own distinct handwriting. Words she had never thought, never written. The sentence formed slowly, a final, horrifying confirmation of her fate. "I'm not alone in this house anymore." The pen on her desk rolled, just slightly, as if nudged by an unseen hand, waiting for her to pick it up and continue the story. Margaret's story. And now her own. Thank you so much for watching. What a chilling tale. I don't know about you, but I'll be sleeping with the lights on tonight. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. We love having you here. Stay safe, and see you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into a story that will make you question reality. A tale where the past isn't just haunting the present, it's rewriting it. This is the story of Elena Marsh and the chilling secret of the Lakehouse Journal. Our story begins in the quiet hush of morning, the kind of stillness that feels heavy, unnatural. Sunlight, thin and pale like weak gold, filters through the curtains of an old lake house. Elena sits at a worn wooden desk, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Before her lie journals, bound in identical cracked leather. One is hers, filled with her own thoughts and fears. The other, she found in the attic, belongs to Margaret Marsh, a relative she never knew who lived in this very house decades ago. As Elena compares the entries, a horrifying realization dawns on her. They are not just similar, they are the same. Every frustration, every secret fear she's poured onto the pages of her own journal, Margaret had already written word for word, a lifetime ago. It feels as if Margaret's life is a script, and Elena is the unwitting actor, forced to play out a tragedy that has already reached its conclusion. Her hands, trembling slightly, turn to Margaret's final entries. The once elegant script dissolves into a frantic, desperate scrawl. The words are a chaotic mess, a testament to a mind unraveling. But one line, gouged into the paper and underlined 3 times, leaps out at her. What? It's a warning, a plea from across the years. "If I stop writing, the lake takes me back." Elena whispers the words aloud, not a sound swallowed by the oppressive silence of the house. The lake takes me back. Her gaze drifts to the window. Outside, the lake is a sheet of dark, polished glass. There's no breeze to ripple its surface, no birdsong, no sign of life. It's a void, waiting. As she stares, her own reflection looks back, a pale, hollow-eyed stranger she barely recognizes. She reaches out, her fingertips pressing against the cold pane of glass. It feels like touching the surface of the lake itself, a chilling, unnerving cold that seeps into her bones. Suddenly, a faint rustle breaks the silence. On the desk, Margaret's journal flutters open, seemingly on its own. The page is blank, but not for long. Elena watches, frozen in disbelief as dark, wet letters begin to press themselves into the paper, as if an invisible hand is writing from beneath the page. "You're close now," the words form. "Finish it." A cold dread washes over her. Finish what? The story. Margaret's life. Her own. Her hand, shaking uncontrollably, reaches for a pen. With a surge of desperate courage, she scrawls a reply directly onto the page, her own handwriting a stark contrast to the spectral script. What am I supposed to finish? Silence. The invisible author offers no reply. The house holds its breath. A few minutes crawl by, each second stretching into an eternity. Then, a flicker of movement. Her laptop screen, which had been dark, springs to life. A new document materializes on the screen. The cursor blinks expectantly beneath a title she didn't write. Asterisk, The Lakehouse Journal, by Elena Marsh asterisk. Before she can even process the implications, words begin to appear on the screen, typed by an unseen force. Margaret tried to bring him back, the lake answered. What? But it doesn't give it trades. Elena's pulse hammers in her ears. She can barely form the question, her voice a ragged whisper. Trades? For what? Asterisk plink. Asterisk a single drop of water lands on the polished wood of the desk. Asterisk plink. Asterisk another follows. She looks up at the ceiling, expecting to find a leak from the storm, but the plaster is perfectly dry. Her eyes dart back to the desk. The water isn't coming from above. It's seeping from the journal itself. Margaret's journal is weeping. Its pages are becoming damp, glistening, the ink starting to blur as if the book is being soaked from the inside out. The smell of lake water, damp earth, and decaying leaves fills the room. Lena scrambles backward, her chair scraping harshly against the floorboards. She stumbles away from the desk, her breath coming in ragged, panicked gasps. But even from across the room, she can see the words continuing to spill onto the laptop screen, relentless and terrifying. The story ends when the writer does. A blinding flash of lightning rips through the sky, illuminating the world outside in a stark, momentary glare. For a split second, the scene is frozen in time. The rain, the trees, the dock, stretching out into the dark water. And on the dock, a figure. A woman standing at the very edge, her hair soaked and plastered to her face, her form shrouded in shadow. But even in that fleeting moment, the shape is undeniably familiar. Darkness crashes back in. Elena, heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird, rushes to the window, peering out into the now pouring rain. The dock is empty. There's no one there. Was it a trick of the light? A figment of her terrified imagination? She presses her forehead against the cool, rain-streaked glass, trying to calm her racing pulse. And that's when she sees it. Her reflection is shaking, trembling just as she is. But the eyes staring back at her through the glass, wide with a terror that is both ancient and immediate, are not her own. They are dark, haunted, and utterly hopeless. They belong to Margaret Marsh. The story isn't just repeating, it's merging. And Elena is no longer just the reader. She is the final chapter. What do you think will happen next? Is Elena doomed to repeat Margaret's fate? Or can she find a way to break the cycle and rewrite the ending? Let me know your theories down in the comments. The story is far from over. Thank you so much for joining me on this chilling journey today. If you enjoyed this dive into the darkness, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that explore the shadows. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a story that will send a shiver down your spine. A tale where the line between author and character blurs into the murky depths of a haunted lake. This is the story of Elena Marsh in the Lakehouse Journal. Our story begins on a dark and stormy night. Rain is hammering against an isolated lake house, each drop like a drumbeat counting down to something terrible. Inside, a writer named Elena is staring at her work, her face pale in the glow of her laptop. Words are appearing on the screen, but she isn't typing them. They form on their own, a chilling message. The story ends when the writer does. Elena whispers to the empty room, "Then what happens if I stop?" The only answer is the wind, screaming like a tortured soul through the old window frames. The screen flickers again, and more words bleed onto the page. She thought she could escape by leaving the story unfinished. But the lake never forgets its author. Thunder cracks, shaking the very foundations of the house. In a surge of terror, Elena slams the laptop shut. She grabs her journals, the ones filled with her frantic writing, and flees into the raging storm. Barefoot, she runs towards the lake, the cold rain stinging her skin. The wind howls around her, and it almost sounds like it's speaking, like a voice whispering a single chilling command. Finish it. She reaches the end of the wooden dock, soaked and trembling. In a brilliant flash of lightning, she sees her. Standing in the shallows is a figure, a pale woman with dark hair plastered to her face. It's the same ghostly woman she's been seeing, the one who haunts the edges of her vision. The one who started this nightmare. "Margaret," Elena shouts, her voice nearly lost in the gale. The figure doesn't react at first. Then her voice drifts across the water, quiet and filled with an ancient sorrow. "I only wanted to bring him back," she says. But the lake gives nothing. It only trades. Holding the journals tight against her chest, Elena asks the question that has been tormenting her. "What did you trade?" Margaret's gaze lifts slowly, her eyes hollow and lost. "Myself," she whispers. "So he could go." A horrifying realization dawns on Elena, colder than the rain soaking through her clothes. This isn't just Margaret's story anymore. It's a cycle. "And now," Elena says, her voice shaking, "it's my turn." The ghost of Margaret simply nods once. Then, she takes a step back and another, until the dark. Churning water rises up and swallows her whole, leaving no trace she was ever there. Elena drops the journals onto the wet planks of the dock. The wind whips the pages open, and she sees the ink shimmering under the rain. But it's not Margaret's handwriting anymore. It's hers. The final line reads, "She finished the story." And the lake finally slept. As she reads her own words, a strange peace settles over her. Her frantic breathing slows. The storm, as if tied to the story itself, begins to fade. The wind dies down, and the violent waves on the lake grow calm, becoming as smooth and reflective as a dark mirror. The curse, it seems, is broken. Story's complete. The next morning, the sun is shining brightly. David, the property's caretaker, arrives to check on the cabin after the storm. He finds the front door swinging open in the gentle breeze. Inside, the house is eerily quiet. The typewriter on the desk is still warm to the touch, and next to it sits a single finished notebook. He picks it up. The title is written in clean, elegant black ink, "The Lakehouse Journal, completed by Elena Marsh." He begins to flip through the pages, captivated by the beautiful, haunting prose describing the lake, the oppressive silence, and the story of a writer who couldn't stop writing. It's a masterpiece. He reads page after page, completely absorbed. But when he gets to the end, he finds the very last page is blank. Completely empty except for a single, small, wet fingerprint pressed into the paper, as if someone had touched it right after climbing out of the water. Confused, David looks out the window. The lake is perfectly still, shimmering under the morning sun. It looks peaceful, beautiful, even. But then, for just a second, he sees it. A single, tiny ripple moving across the glassy surface from the middle of the lake, heading towards the shore. Before it vanishes completely, leaving the water as still as a grave. What do you think happened to Elena? Did she break the curse and walk away? Or did the lake claim its new author? Let me know your theories down in the comments. This story is a chilling reminder that some places hold on to their stories, and sometimes the price of finishing them is everything. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the dark. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, and do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you don't miss our next descent into the unknown. Stay safe, and see you next time.